Dr. Angharad Thomas, as many of you will know, is a researcher, a designer, published many patents. One of her greatest loves is, of course, knitting gloves, particularly multicolored ones, such as the Sanka gloves and Estonian and Latvian pattern gloves, which are fabulous things. But she's going to be talking to us about lace today. And she's brought along a few things from the collection at Britannia Mills in Yorkshire, where she is our current textile archivist for the Guild. So I think without further ado, Angharad, if we pin you and pass you over to you, you can get yourself going.
Righty ho. Well, thank you all so much for choosing to come to this workshop. And I'm not going to apologise for things like the rowing machine in the background, or it's not my spare room, but it's a fairly typical spare room from all the spare rooms I've seen on Zoom, I think, you know, with things that don't work and guitars and things in the background. So, I mean, normally I try to get background, you know, get a very plain background or get lots of books, but anyway. And had a life not got in the way, I was planning to do this from the collection, which I'm not sure any of you have actually visited, but Lindy has, I know. But I have, so I have brought some items of lace from the collection. The collection has a huge amount of very, very lovely lace. And I did a workshop based on the lace in the collection for the Birmingham group about, it was actually in 2016 because I had to look up. So we looked at lace in the morning and then we knitted in the afternoon. And ultimately it's based on this yellow sampler that we've got that we know very little about. But so I've brought one or two pieces with me, which I'm going to hold up in front of the camera. It's not ideal, but it works, and it does. So I'm putting on my rather ill-fitting white gloves. I'll tell you a little bit about the collection because I think some of you will know and some of you won't know. And I'm afraid I haven't asked you to do introductions and so on. I know some of you, and that introductions thing is always so excruciating, isn't it, I think. So white gloves, some collections, if you go and visit, they ask you to wear, they provide rather nasty purple nitrile gloves, purple or blue, and they're disposable. We still use white cotton gloves. The debate rages as to whether you are better with clean washed hands or whether you're better with white gloves, which we have a two system. We have a bag for used ones and a bag for new ones. Washing them's easy, you put them in the washing machine, but hanging them up, you know, 60 or 80 pegs are needed, and a good drying day. So I think gloves are better because they immediately cover things like rings and watches. I should take my watch off, for handling particularly lace because it is so fragile. So the workshop is about Shetland lace, so I've brought some Shetland scarves that are just very simple, but very, very lovely, I think. I do, and this is a very typical one. This is a razor shell pattern, which is one of the patterns on the worksheet. And all these, they're all wool, they're all quite fine. The scarves aren't super fine, they're just probably a Jameson's, what they call their 2-ply weight. But it occurs to me that looking at these colours, these are so old that they will have been knitted, each colour will have been knitted separately. And if you look at this one, there's much more garter stitch on it, and that's one thing that you can do very quickly and easily with lace, is to put garter stitch, knit stitches on your wrong side row instead of purl, so you get more texture. And I just think these are lovely. You can see the edges, the knitter has deliberately made a loop, and that enables you to run a thread through it, and you can then block it much more easily, and you can see the points where they've been blocked as well. So, and these are knitted in one piece, and you can see the distortion that you get as soon as you start to increase and decrease, then your stripes distort. And what occurs to me is that a sock yarn that's got a fairly long repeat would knit into one of these patterns and give you stripes similar to this. That's my guess. I love this one. It's so vintagey, it's so old-fashioned looking. It's quite wide. It's more of a sort of muffler. You know, you'd put it on and just fold it over in the collar in the neck of your coat, your tweed coat. And it's a proper feather and fan. So you've got lace holes separated by decreases, and one of the charts is for feather and fan, or it's also called old shale. And people have had very, very intense arguments and discussions about whether it's called feather and fan or old shale. And I think the ultimate, the decision has been that in actual fact they're quite similar or the same. But I very much like this one, and I get, when I'm knitting scarves and shawls and things, I get very sort of nerdy about the wrong side looking this, you know, about both sides looking the same. And this has got a very pronounced wrong side, because I'm hoping you can see that the light's not so good, that the color changes have all been worked on the same side, which give you those little sort of beads of color, which I always very much disapproved of for a long time, when I thought that knitting had to be terribly neat and all the same. And then I read a crochet book, which is by a woman called Louisa Calder. It was called Louisa Calder's Creative Crochet, and it was just fabulous. It's from like the 70s or 80s. And where she changes color, she gets this little bead of color contrasting. And I just thought, oh yes, that's absolutely the right thing. So this is a good example of old shale. And I should tell you also a little bit about where some of these have come from. So I'll finish showing you this little group. Now this, if you followed our 100 objects project, oh, that's much better, isn't it, with the light? Yeah. This was object, I wrote it down, object number 9, I think. And it's called cockle shell, and unfortunately we don't have the chart for it, but it's probably similar to old shale, except that instead of doing lots of knit 2 together, you just do this one enormous, I think it's a knit 17 together. Can you see? I think that's so.
Grief.
I very much like this one, and I brought it because this has been knitted in 2 halves and then grafted down the middle, making sure that you've got a couple of plain rows at the end of each piece, and then you can do a graft. So I thought that was right, and this was bought new. It still has its Shetland label, which we photographed for the 100 Objects project. And then these are another couple of, again, vintagey little razor shell pattern. Just realized I haven't got a clock or a watch. Where's my watch? So if we get to 12:30, just shut me up, you know. That's I like all of these. They're just very simple and you know, then what you see is what you get, and I like that very much. And I was also wanting to tell you just a little bit about where they've come from. Some of these, this one, you can see the accession number on a tape. All our textile pieces have an accession number, and it consists of the year, which on this is 1991, the donor, and then the piece number. So if somebody gave something in 1998, then it would be 1998. And if they were our 10th donor, then it would be 10. And then if they gave us 10 pieces, then they would be numbered 1 to 10 as the third digit. So that's roughly it. Anyway, I'm telling, and Steve is getting his head around all of this as well. So some of these were bought specially for the collection when it very first started in 1991. They're very early pieces. We had a person called Audrey Stratford who bought a lot of what she thought we should have in the collection. So about 4 or 5 Shetland scarves, a jumper from the Faroe Islands, all sorts of things. And then 1 or 2 others have come in later, and then 1 or 2 have come in and we don't know where they came from. So they don't have a donor number, they just have a 000. And this one is another. Now, I thought, oh, I wonder if I should, Lindsay.
Just before you go on, Angharad, Catherine has asked, do we know how the loops were made in the first one? So I'm assuming that's the edging. If you want
you just have to make sure that you do, to get a loop edging, you need a slip stitch on your knit row and a purl stitch at the end of the row. So a slip knitwise at the start of the row and a purl at the end, and that gives you quite a large V shape, which if you then pulled it would give you just a single loop.
Thank you. Happy with that, Catherine?
And that's another thing I'll talk about. When you start to knit, you can play with your selvages as well. You can decide how you want the edges to look. So that's a good thing to think about. So this one is also an Audrey Stratford 1991 one, but as you can see, it's got much more structured lace patterns on it, a star and various diamonds. And I'm just really sorry that we're not in real life, because this is the only piece of knitting that I've seen that's in Quiviet, which is the underbelly of the muskox, which I think is more or less the same thing as a bison, only it lives a bit further up north. So you can get the fibre, and a woman called Donna Druckness, who writes quite a lot about knitting, did a book called Arctic Lace, and she writes about this group of people who've got the fibre, spun the yarns out, and it is just incredibly soft and gorgeous. I mean, even more gorgeous and much more expensive than cashmere. And this is the little label on it. Of course, for me, it's reading backwards, but it's 100% Quiviet, Arctic hand knitted. They're all up in the north of, it must be Canada, I think. And so that is the only piece we have in the collection knitted in Quiviet. I'm not even sure how to say it, actually. And the other thing that's interesting, I think, is that there's a nice generous garter stitch edge hem on the bottom and a bit of a garter stitch edging up either side, probably 4-6 stitches. Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, thanks, Tricia.
So I thought that was interesting, although it's not strictly speaking Shetland lace. Trouble is, when you start showing things from the collection, you always end up dying under a whole mountain of tissue paper. And my biggest fear is losing something in the tissue paper. And then this is one of our very finest. This is back to Shetland lace again. And this is a piece, again, bought by Audrey Stratford, although we do have other Shetland lace. And this is, it is actually a stole. Now, if I...
Oh, fabulous.
So you can, I mean, it is just, and I apologize, I usually try to wear something plain when I do these things, but I just ran out of luggage space. So you can see how big it is and how fine it is. The patterns alternate in these diamonds and hexagons. And then, I mean, this would qualify as a wedding ring. They call them wedding ring shawls, but we have 2 stoles, and then you can see the border round the edges. And it's all just, I've got a rolly chair that doesn't roll unless you're sitting on it. It's just absolutely gorgeous, I think, this. And the points around the edges from where it's been blocked, or as they call it, dressed. I'm sure you know, they run a thread through each point, and then it all goes onto a frame and gets pulled really tight. And this will be hand spun yarn. It is a 2-ply. It's probably finer. Each ply is probably finer than sewing cotton. So let me try to hold it up right to my camera so that you can.
That is very, very fine.
Can you see it?
We can.
It's gorgeous, isn't it? It just, you know, we use, yeah, I think, did somebody just say breathtaking? And we've got at least 2. We've got another one that came in the collection with our coats collection, which we're working on at the moment, and that was in our 100 objects. We've got 3. It was 32, I think, in the 100 objects. So you'll find it on the website or on Instagram, and it's we photographed that draped on a dress stand, and that is also just gorgeous. So okay, back to Shetland, back to the yellow sampler now. And I won't try and unwrap it and talk. So we've got 4 lace samplers really in the collection. We've got the Gladys Jeskins one, the very, very long pink extraordinary artifact, which some of you may or may not know about. We've got 2 Victorian vintage lace samplers, which I was going to bring, but I decided they're so rich, and there's a book that's very, very good about a similar one, which would form the basis for another workshop, actually, because there's just so much there. So we've got 2 of those, one of which has a date in it. I do recommend every time you knit something, you must knit in either your name and the date, just somewhere, you know, just tuck it in, because it makes things ever so much easier for people who come across them later. And then we've got this, which is knitted. Oh, we found it. It's very long. It's all in tissue paper at the moment. That's what goes in the middle. And it's all the stitches that you've got on your charts. I'm knee deep in tissue paper. So
Yes,
we
I
don't
see
know
that.
who knitted it, but it's knitted very, very beautifully in a series of panels, and each one is a different lace stitch. And you've got the charts for each one of these, and there's a little bit of a story with the charts as well. There is the sides are different. Some of the stitches have got a knit and a purl side to them. I think we commissioned a photographer, and I actually got some of them the wrong way up. So we've got some rather nice photographs of the wrong side of some of these, but you know, they still look good. So that is the feather and fan there. That's a bit of the yarn that just seems to come with it. And then it's just so nicely knitted. And I think this is a Shetland 2-ply. I'm sorry, I'm really not showing it terribly well.
Yeah.
Ah,
I
now
like
you
that one.
that's good, isn't it? Yes, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yes. That's a faggoted cabling. Whew. I'm not. Well, you can have a go at it later on if you want to, with pleasure. So you can get the idea of just what a lovely thing it is. And the interesting thing is that it came with a set of little cards that give you the instructions. Hang on. Feel like Delia. I don't think I'm as good as her. These cards are a part of it, and they're the instructions for each stitch, all written out in somebody's best handwriting. Oh yes, it's Copley Cobweb 2-ply. It says there, and that's the key. And then each card has a. Now, I realized, because it tells you on the card where they've got it from, the person who made these. Treasury of Knitting Patterns, Barbara Walker. Knitting Fashion, Pam Dawson, all that fabulous 70s book, you know, with the grey cover, or Golden Hands. So I had this, how many stitches did she cast on? I'd have to count, probably about 60, I'd say, at a rough guess, but you could count it. So there was a copyright issue here, because these are all works that are still in copyright. So the charts you've got for the handout were all redone by a good friend of mine called Hilary Diaper. So she has spent the summer recharting these designs, and we think there's no copyright on the actual designs, because Mary Thomas gives 10 traditional Shetland patterns, lace patterns, and there are obviously more. So there isn't a copyright issue with the actual patterns, but there was with these written instructions. And then the other thing we have with this, Elspeth May, who some of you will know, and all of you will know from being one of the editors of Slipknot, saw this sampler and took away copies of the cards, those are mine, and made individual swatches for each one, so that it would save handling the actual sampler. So
oh, brilliant.
Yes, they're just lovely. So if there's one later on that you really want a close look at, then I can hold it up and, you know, can poke at it and count and that sort of thing. So, and they each have a little tag on with their name.
Well done, Elspeth.
Yes. So that that is everything I've got to show. What I suggest you do now. Oh, and I hope I was going to send out an extra message, but I was just that, and that's the very last one, the faggoting cable. I hope you've printed out the charts, because it's completely possible to work them off a screen. I mean, I was doing that while I was away. Well done. But it's just tons easier if you've got them on paper, because you can write down what you're doing, and you can, if you want to add edge stitches, you can put +4, you know, and so on, and just make notes. And the other interesting thing is, once you get knitting, is that you realize how comparatively simple it is to alter these, to customize them. So the feather and fan, as it's written out, is I can't remember whether it's a 6 yarn over knits and 3 lots of knit 2 togethers, but that can be altered. You could make it 12 of each, or you could do them much close together. And the razor shells, again, which is the second pattern, if my memory serves me correctly, because it's all buried, you can alter that. But what I suggest you do, if you haven't already, is think about how many stitches you want to cast on. I strongly suggest that you think of this as a sample, as a working sample. If you want to cast on 70 stitches to do a scarf, then yeah, get on with it. You know, it's up to you. I just think it's just fun to be not exactly told what to do. It's a bit scary. It's a bit like in yoga, where she says, well, you could go to the wall to do this, or you can do it in the middle of the room, and you think, oh no, what am I going to do? So, you know, have a what am I going to do moment, and go and have a coffee, and or think about it and then go and have a coffee, because I said 11:15. So think about how many stitches you want to cast on. What I have been doing, this is my sampler swatch from when I taught this a while ago. So I just vary the number of stitches. So if one is a multiple of 10 plus 2, then I might start with 22, and then the next one's 15, then just work a couple or 3 rows of garter stitch, knit stitch, and do a bit of decreasing either at the edges or across the row, you know. And again, that's quite an interesting thing to do. Or if you need to increase, then you can do that. So it's entirely up to you. The other thing I would have said is, I did say this, is work with a plain yarn. I've lost my.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. So yeah, so I started checking the new charts, and I started off with a ball of cashmere, which is it's rather lovely. It's Louisa Harding's cashmere, which she's one of our patrons. But it's plied. She has 2 colors plied together to give a sort of mild effect. And honestly, it was a bit of a nightmare, you know, purling 2 together through the backs with a marled yarn in 2 quite loose plies really wasn't working. And I had some gloves with me, black and white, 3 ply, and then I resorted to the white 3 ply, and much easier and more straightforward. So that's my rather scrappy bit of test knitting. The other thing I would say, and I think this is a fashion thing. I think you must try to find some needles with good points. I mean, those are the best I could find in a just an ordinary knitting needle. These are also old UK sizes. My others are 4mm. I think, I mean, I use double pointed mostly, and I get them with lace points because it's just so much easier to do things like knitting 2 together, or, you know, all those sorts of things are just much easier with needles with good points. So I hope you have got those. And then the other thing, and I did say, bring bits of, you know, remaindered bits of wool and a variety of needles, because the relationship between your needles and your yarn is the crucial one. For a very open lace, then obviously a big needle and a fine yarn, and you get lots of space. I mean, you can, and which will then block out. I mean, that's a 3 ply, old-fashioned 3 ply on 4mm, but you could take it up even bigger than that. Whereas this little sampler, I think I probably knitted on something like probably written down somewhere, probably a 2 or a 3, and this is it's a 4 ply. It's a machine knitting yarn actually. So you will get. But dealing with a fine yarn and big needles is quite tricky because they're not balanced, you know. So anyway, the other thing I would say, and then I will stop talking, is, and this is common sense really, choose, if this is the very first lace knitting you've done, choose one that has an alternate pattern. An alternate row, not patterning every row, because and I have got something else to say. So for instance, bead stitch, the very first one, unless you want the challenge, don't start with that one. Start with one of the razor shells, or lovely feather and fan is nice. Oh, Crest of the Wave is fun. Crown of Glory looks a bit scary because there's some bits where there aren't stitches, but once you're knitting, it all works. It's fine. The very last thing I'm going to say is, this is flat knitting. You'll be knitting backwards and forwards. So your chart goes knit along there, and then read it that way for the wrong side. Yeah. So you're doing that each time. Some of them are symmetrical, and it wouldn't actually matter a huge amount if it wasn't like that. But so along the knit way and back the purl way. I mean, you could knit it all circular if you wanted to, but that's a different exercise, I think. So
one quick question. Going back to Elsa's samples, did she choose to knit her swatches in yellow in order to keep continuity with the original long sampler, or was that just, you know, sort of how she felt at the time, yarn she had at the time?
No, I think she must have. Because it's so nice, because we call it the yellow sampler. And you know, and it is. So yeah. And then just another thing, obviously, casting on, go for loose, go for either a bigger, I'm just trying to flatten that out a bit because it was in a bit of a heap, either just consciously make your cast on loose or use a larger size needle. Or if you know one of those very stretchy methods, who is it? There's somebody who's got a famous casting on that's stretchy. Judy. Yeah.
Judy's stretchy cast on.
Stretchy cast on.
And
So,
cast off.
but honestly, and there are cases where you might want to do a provisional cast on, but if you think about this as just a getting started and getting into it, then just cast on. Questions before we have
Angharad,
yes.
question about the charts.
Yes.
Do the charts you've given, since you're recommending people do patterns with rest rows, have they all got the assumption that the wrong side row is just purled?
Yes, unless it's indicated otherwise. But you could immediately alter the look of it by doing, if you did your other side rows knit, then the whole structure becomes a garter stitch lace rather than a stocking stitch lace. So that is the assumption on some of them. Let me show you. For instance, that is, and I don't know the names of all of these, but the basic fabric on that, I think you can see, is a stocking stitch.
Yeah.
I mean, we shouldn't be using these terms. There are different ones that are more technical and more accurate, but and this is another one. This one is, I think it's either pine cones or fir cones or something. And that you see the let me hold it right up. The areas of plain fabric are stocking stitch face, and then obviously reverse on the other side. Some of the charts are just a little bit odd. They get you starting on a purl row, but just knit across a couple of rows and then get started, and then you've got you're on row 2 by the time you're patterning.
Brilliant.
I'm going to just put that. So what I suggest is
right.
I'll answer that in a minute.
Okay, sure.
You can get started. I'm going to pop off for a coffee for 1/4 of an hour just to try and catch up with myself, and let you have a think things through, and then we'll come back and we can chat and you can ask questions. I'm just conscious that it's going to be hard to actually show you physically how to do things, but I'm sure you'll manage that. And questions will come up as you knit and as you work through things. If I was on a small number of stitches, I was working through one of these charts in 20 minutes or so, just sufficient rows to start to get a feel for how it's coming out or not coming out. And that's the other nice thing. If you're working a sample piece, if it's not coming out, you can just think, oh, I'll knit a few more rows and I'll start another one. So it doesn't all have to be perfect.
Do you want to address Jane's question about the Crown of Glory just before you go? Because if she wants to cast on with that one, she knows.
Yes. So you start with the 19 stitches, and then it does all work, I promise. Yeah.
You must have a couple of knit twos together somewhere so that you've then got a no stitch as you go up the pattern, if that makes sense to Jane.
Yes, and this is the one that has the it comes out as a big as that, what they call the crown of glory. That this bit here is, it quite honestly is a bit horrible to work, because you've got lots of yarn overs, those 3 yarn overs all at once, and they have this horrible tendency to just flip off the needle. So it's good to keep a finger on that loop as you knit it. But I have also found that you can fudge these things, you know, if they come off and you've got some yarn, then you can do a quick wrap around on it. But if I was going to knit that for a finished piece, I'd want to practice, because these edges are really a little bit cumbersome and a bit tricky. So yeah.
Right.
Angharad, I don't really know what no stitch means.
Oh, it means there isn't a stitch there. So it's
You want me to, when people are charting patterns, they try and keep the pattern looking symmetrical. So if with that crown of glory one, for instance, you're going to start with 19 stitches, they will show the chart row 1 as having 19 stitches, and then you might knit 2 or 3 rows on those 19 stitches. But at some point you're going to do a decrease, and therefore in order to keep the sides of the pattern chart straight, you know, that where you've done your knit 2 together, that there isn't a stitch above that second stitch in the next row.
Yeah,
you've effectively lost a stitch, but in order to keep them being able to
keep the number of
shine
charts.
out, they will usually put a sort of a black square, or say no stitch, or whatever. So it's just a way of not having a chart go in and out as your
so this is following on from the row above, which says yarn over, because you put the yarn over, so you've lost a stitch.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, I get it now.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Lindy. That's helpful. It's very disconcerting when you see it first, and you just have to follow it and take faith, really. I mean, they're used quite a lot in knitting gloves and mittens, because you start off with no stitches there, and then it gets bigger, and it is tricky, but it does work. And it's quite an interesting problem, this representing something on a flat surface that is actually moving.
Coffee time, Angharad, I think, for you.
Is that okay? I'm my partner said, so shall I do the loyal husband thing and come in with a cup of coffee? And I said, no, it's okay. I shall come out. I
stretch
and have a yes. I have to set a timer to get up at frequent intervals. Oh, I think this is. Here he is.
Well done, Gordon. Thank you. But I still think we all need to get up and stretch, because that's one of the other things with.
I think I might just have to go to the loo, actually.
Yeah, that's one of the other things with working in workshops and sitting and looking at the screen for too long and being in one position for too long is not good for us. So I think sort of stretch and sort of do all the right things with your hands and your fingers so that they're ready to work. And we'll see you in about 10 minutes, Angharad, if that's okay.
5 minutes will do it. So yes, I'll just stop my video and pop to the loo and drink my coffee, so I'm not spilling it everywhere, and see you with lots of questions, I'm kind of assuming.
Yeah. Catherine has sort of said, how many stitches should she cast on? She needs to be told, or I'll start a scarf.
Oh, well, choose a sample, choose a stitch pattern, and see what the stitch multiple is.
Well, I'm going to start with razor shell. I haven't got a lot of plain wool, but I've got these 3 colours.
Oh,
Ooh,
nice.
nice.
Okay. Well, if you got the pattern set, then you could put a stripe in it straight away. And do you want a scarf?
Yeah, probably.
There you are then. So I would think about, what size needles are you on?
I've got 5s and this is 4-ply.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that would work. Probably about 40 stitches. I don't know.
Yeah, that
something
should
like
do.
that.
Should, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
give that a go. I'm a bit like you in yoga. I just don't want to be given any choices. I just want to be, do this, get on with it. But I'm
Yeah.
also going to have to go on silent for a bit because I'm going to be juggling a little bit, just so as you know, but I'm still here.
Yeah. I think if you have a quick look at the sampler that we've got at the top, I think you'll see that they're mostly sort of something like 3 or 4 repeats of the pattern going across a scarf, and probably 5 or 6 repeats if you're going to have more of a stole, and then obviously 20 repeats if you're going to do a big shawl or whatever. So just choose. If you're going to do the razor shell, you've got 6, so you're going to have 36, 37 stitches to start that one, and
6 on the feather and fan. But I can't emphasize how useful it is, I think, to just knit something that is just a sample, because it means you've got it to refer to, like this one of mine. But also and this is really this is all correct and nice. The one that I'm doing at the moment is a mess, a lot of it. But I found out things on the way. I do want to knit a pair of lace gloves, actually.
I'm not surprised, Angharad.
Some of the Estonian ones in lace are just lovely. The other thing is that there is just such a ton of stuff on the internet for knitting. The person I really like on most techniques is a woman called Stacy, I've forgotten her other name. She's American, and her sort of trade name is Very Pink Knits.
Yeah.
And she's just excellent. She's from Texas or somewhere, and her video tutorials are just, they're clear and simple and sensible and easy to follow and well made, and there's no rowing machines in the background. And, she's just great. I'm not actually that fond of I've been using a backwards loop cast on at the bottom of the base of fingers lately for about the last few months, rather than turning the knitting round and knitting into the stitch, putting it on the needle. And I'm kind of not entirely sure whether I like it or not.
Angharad,
yes,
could you perhaps explain a little bit about a lifeline? I mean, I've read about putting lifelines in to lace knitting, but I don't really understand what it means.
Oh, right. So you just need a length of spare yarn that's strong and not fluffy, and then you run it through the stitches using a sewing up needle on a plain row. You need a plain row, knit or an all knit or an all purl row, and then if it goes horribly wrong, then you can take it off the needle, undo it, back down to that thread and pick all your stitches back up. So
Yeah.
that's what it is.
Thank you. Yes, that makes sense. I was trying to get my head around actually knitting using this length of yarn.
Oh,
but
right.
yes, you just thread it through.
Yes, yes. Which you can see, you know, if you're making a large piece, or, you know, with several hundred stitches or something, then it would be literally a lifesaver.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yes, and that's a great point. Crochet cotton. Yeah, cotton, something strong. I've got a feeling, although I'm not entirely sure about this. I think I've heard of dental floss being used as well. Is that correct?
Yes, you can. Yes. The unwaxed one, you know, the sort of plain one. Obviously not the one that's waxed, because you can get two types of dental floss. But you just use a sort of tapestry needle and just weave the whatever you're using as your lifeline through the front legs of your stitches when they're on the needle. Or I think I'm not sure if it's the Chowgu interchangeable circulars. They have a little hole in them, and you can actually thread your lifeline thread into that, and as you're knitting, it sort of just trundles it along for you. You know, so that you know there are various different ways of doing it, but it's just a way of, if you need to undo it, those stitches are then held. It's like if you put them onto waste yarn, you know, if you're say doing a neck edge or something, it often says, you know, sort of put some stitches on waste yarn. It's the equivalent of that. So they're holding the stitches live for you, and so you know, if you have to undo, then you get back to live stitches that you can then just put on your needle and correct.
Again, yes.
Steve is showing us an inter thing where it's got the hole deliberately, you know, deliberately set up to allow you to feed a lifeline through. And I've forgotten
the hole was actually designed for tightening
yeah,
cable. So it's a hole you would put your key into.
Oh, right.
Holding it up like that, of course I can't see.
Yeah,
So when you normally put your key into, on a rest row, you can slip a thin piece of thread in there, and it will, but make sure you've got a long tail end on it. Otherwise, as you work, it'll just pull its way out, and you'll end up with a lifeline over half your working knot. So just keep making sure that you pull it through, and that pulls it through as you knit, so it's no extra work. That's if you're a person who likes using interchangeables. It's any of the interchangeables that have a key to tighten, that you use that hole to go through. Chargo do, Knit Pro do, Higher. I've not got any of their interchangeables. But.
Yeah. I don't use circular interchangeables, partly because the sizes I need they usually stop at they don't come down to 2mm, but I've also, when I have used them, I've found that one end works its way loose, just the one. And
Me too. And I was about to give up using interchangeables for good when I went to the Edinburgh Yarn Fair. That's what kept me on interchangeables. Higher sell these little things. They're a type of rubber that's very grippy. I found that using elastic bands didn't work for me, but this just gives you that extra minute fraction of a turn that locks them. And since I've been using these, I've never had an interchangeable will come apart.
But I'm quite happy. I've got pretty much all the needles I need. Famous last words. So that's my lifeline. Now I've taken it off the needle. Oh yes, fishing line looks good. £20 trouse. Whoa. You could go on that a bit then, I think. Oh,
It's not
excellent.
slippy, so it just comes straight out.
Yes, and it's a great colour as well.
Mm.
Well, it's lace, it must be yellow.
Oh yes, yellow, yes.
Ah,
That's the other thing. If you knit flat on a double-ended needle, on a circular two-pointed needle, then you can do all sorts of things. You can knit across in a different color and carry it up the side, and you know, you can do quite a lot of bring in quite a lot of variation if you want to. So I've now got a lifeline, and actually, yes, I do that around my gloves, and the only thing I find, you've got to be, yes, I mean, we've had some great suggestions for what to use. If you use a light color against a dark or vice versa, you can have some marking, so you've just got to watch out for that. And fluff as well. I've been known to end up picking bits out with tweezers after I've taken one out. So I now have a lifeline in this. The other thing I think I mentioned in the handout is that there's knitted lace and there's lace knitting, and yes, I know. And knitted lace is, I can't remember where this came from. I think knitted lace is said to have patterning on every row, whereas lace knitting, you get a plain row in between times.
yeah.
But it did also occur to me while I was knitting some of these samples that you could put more rows in between the patterning if you wanted to. You know, there's nothing, you know, it's your knitting. You can do it how you want it. So if you want a plain row between times, you could do. I found the pair of gloves I want to show you.
Yep.
So I've
Wow.
got a billion things. So you should, I've got all sorts of weird, other weird things, but these, I'm hoping you can see a complete image there.
Yeah.
There's a pair of gloves I saw in Estonia about 3 years ago, and I so wished I'd bought them. I keep looking at the picture longingly, and I just love the way it's a very simple lace pattern going up the fingers, and then it goes right up the back of the fingers as well, and then the little cuff is very typical, formed of, you know, decreases and increases that make you get that very chevron-y shape, and with a little, just a simple, something like a 4-row garter stitch cuff. So I keep thinking I must have a go at something like that, because they do this just, and of course the other side is just plain, so that's makes life a lot easier. So yeah, so that's just one example. I'm assuming you're all right.
Yeah. just playing.
Good. Yes, that is really the what I have set it up to be, really. I think workshops where you make something, you know, you end up with a pincushion or a aragumi mushroom or what have you, you know, that, I mean, they have their place and people like them a lot, I think, because you come away with something. But to me, the value of doing something like this, where you both at the one and the same time go a bit freeform, but also within the constraints of having a go at something that's structured is just really, really useful. And you'll end up at the end of, by 12:30, you'll have this horrible little sort of, well, it might be beautiful little teddy bear scarf. Or you know that you've only tried one thing and you wanted to try 4, whatever, but you will have had a go at something that you maybe wouldn't have had a go at otherwise.
Absolutely.
You know, and you might get a chance to cast on 2 or 3 different pieces, and even if they all end up on a length of thread, it doesn't matter because you've got them to come back to.
Angharad, I'm working on the Crown of Glory.
Oh, right.
I've tried it a couple of times and I get to row 5 and I haven't got the right stitch count.
Yes, yeah. Well,
the end of the row, the end of row 5, after you've done you do the 3 yarn overs on row 3.
Yes.
And I've worked out row 4, that's no problem. I've got to row 5 and you do the knit 6 in the middle.
Right.
Then you've got 2 no stitches.
Yeah.
And a knit 2 together and then knit 3 at the end. I've only got 2 at the I do the knit 2 together and I've only got 2 stitches at the end of the row and I can't figure out where it's going wrong. Yeah. I can either miss out the knit 2 together and have 3 stitches, but then it doesn't work on the row back. I can't quite figure out what's gone wrong.
For the sake of keeping on with it so that you keep the trick, that horrible tricky bit in the middle.
Yeah.
I think I would miss out the knit 2 at the end of that row above, and then or just make one possibly in that middle run of 5 stitches.
Right, what I'll do, I'll have a go at leaving out that purl 2 together on row 6. Is that, I can't figure out now, that's not going to work either, is it?
I must admit, I did some unashamed fudging when I was trying these out this time, and I was surprised actually how doable it was. Although obviously if it's going to be a finished piece and you're going to be blocking it, then it's got to be right. I would aim. So you're on row 5 now.
I'm on row 5, yeah. I've done the knit 6 in the middle and it looks fine. But if I knit 2 together there, I've only got 2 stitches at the end.
Why don't you pick up a sneaky loop to make those end 3
make an extra stitch?
3.
Yeah.
And then your line of decreases ought to stay the same,
right?
Hopefully.
Right, I'll give that a try.
See where that decrease is falling. If it's falling above, then make your extra stitch in the 3 at the end. If it's the other side, make one in the middle.
Right.
Do you see? Make
one. Yeah. I've picked one up and kind of, yeah, and I've got 3 at the end now. So I'll see how that looks and just sort of play around with that decrease.
Yeah, because I think that bit where you do the 3 overs and the 5 above it is horrible to do. So
yeah, I have done it a couple of times and tried again, but I wasn't winning. So
I know the feeling well.
I'll persevere.
Yes, yeah, because it gets really nice above that. The row where you've got all those yarn overs is nice, and then you get lots of knit rows. And
yeah, I'll try it for another couple of pattern repeats and do a few different things on that decrease and see what works. Right, thank you. At least I know I'm not going mad. It was sort of a sanity.
No, not at all. No, that's the other thing. If it's just the sample, you can either just say, well, this is driving me a bit potty, I'm just going to knit 3 or 4 rows and just have another go, you know.
That's right, exactly. Right, okay, I'll persevere. Thanks for your help. Thank you.
You're welcome. And if there's anything you want to look at, then I can hold things up for you.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've looked at the largest sample, which is the last one, the print of the wave, I think, and I've cast on enough so that I can do 2 pattern repeats of that, and I'm now regretting my decision.
Oh.
But anyway, we'll see how it goes.
Yes, I think there's a crest of the wave and a print of the wave. And these, it seems as though these stitches, oh yes, there's crest of the wave. We've got a folder back at the collection, and Barbara Smith, our pattern curator, found a lace pattern in a Victorian knitting book, and I think it was print of the wave. And we've got a tiny little, it's a pincushion cover. It's about the size of probably the size of these cards, and it's print of the wave in very, very fine cotton. It's absolutely gorgeous, but it's yeah, I think that shows a certain ambition going straight to number 12.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to cast on enough so that I'd have the possibility of doing all of the samples. But it's like there's a lot of stitches. I've got like 55 stitches, so, and I wanted to do a little bit of a garter stitch border, so everyone's on their patterns already and I'm still doing my border, so.
Oh, well, you see, if you've got 55 stitches, that's quite a lot.
Yeah.
I started with probably about 20, but I think for these Elspeth used probably the right number for the actual swatch.
Yeah, like increasing when you need a few more, it makes a lot of sense. But I've got that kind of attitude where I wanted to make it big enough to accommodate all of the patterns if I wanted to.
Ah.
You know what that's like, I'm sure. But I'm actually starting with one of the easier ones, the ploughed acre. That looks like quite nice and straightforward, so I'm going to do that first and see how that goes.
Yes,
Wanted to share my pain. Thank you.
Yes, the razor shell and the ploughed acre are both really nice. Which is why you see all these scarves. I think I've bought 7, and I think 4 of them are a variation of razor shell or ploughed acre. And the talking about the razor shell, there's a pointy knit 3 together on the key, and I've translated those as a knit 2 or purl 2 together and slip stitch over. But I know that certainly one of you's got Barbara Walker, and there's all sorts of different ways of doing. Yes, very good. Yeah. Of doing a decrease, you know, there are actually slightly nicer ways, I think. So and one thing I was going to mention to you is, which I think is a bit of a golden rule in pattern knitting, if you start doing something, then just repeat it, just keep doing it the same. I mean, obviously in this sample, if there's these decreased 3s, you can try doing it one way, a knit 2 together, a slip 1, knit 2 together, pass slip stitch over, or a knit 3 together, or whatever. I mean, there are various other ways. I think Monty Stanley has at least another one way of doing it, which is probably the best. But then decide which one you're going to use and just carry on using that one, you know. So you're getting a pattern by doing things the same way once you've sort of decided which one you're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that was something when I first picked up doing knitting, which was in the early 1980s. I got Muntz's Hand Knitter's Handbook as virtually the first book on actual techniques of knitting, and I was amazed at the fact that you paired your increases and therefore you got and decreases and therefore you got stitches which would lie over the top of one another or lie behind one another, and they would give you these nice angles, and she's got about 3 or 4 pages of how to pair your increases and decreases if you're doing sort of raglan fashioning and all this sort of stuff, and for lace it's absolutely first rate, because yes, you can make all your patterning come out really beautifully, but
Yeah,
there is more than one way of doing a double or a treble increase or decrease, that sort of gives you a slightly different effect depending on how you work them.
yeah. The book I ended up looking at, partly because it's on my Kindle and I was away, is June Hemmons Hyatt, Principles of Knitting, and she is and that's another great workshop. I think she starts off, you look up lace in June Hemmons Hyatt, and she starts with eyelets, just the yarn over, knit 2 together, and all the different ways you can do that, and the different effects you can get. And if you do them right across a row, all in the same direction, you end up with a bias fabric and all sorts of things. So just lots and lots to experiment with. It really is fascinating. I always think you get a lot of bang for your buck with lace.
Indeed.
Which must be one of the reasons why it's so popular, really. I mean, people, do knit a lot of lace, don't they? All the shawls and the cowls and so on. And it's such a lovely fabric, because it can be so light and open, and it can make very, very expensive yarn go a long way. So I'm really selling it to myself here.
So you will have to do your gloves.
Oh, I will. And I've got at least another 2 workshops planned. Actually, this a Zoom workshop does have the benefit that in my opinion, that if you are suffering, which I always do in workshops, because I can never get the hang of it, and I usually end up having to go outside because I'm getting into such a tangle. And also I've decided I'm quite a slow knitter, so everybody else is on sample 6, and I'm still fiddling around, casting on and losing my needles and things, and changing places and stuff like that. But I think this way, I mean, you can just sort of tootle along, and if you want to, you can just even get rid of your pictures. So might work quite well.
I think the sort of downside of doing it on Zoom, of course, is that we don't all actually sort of, I'm not able to sort of peer over and say, "Ooh, that's coming out nicely. I think I'll do that one next," or whatever, sort of whatever, and and to see, sort of all the different ways in which people do their knitting. Sort of, where perhaps people are using circular needles with a lifeline for the first time, and you've never seen it before. It's something you think, ooh, sort of, where did how do you do that, and this sort of thing.
Yes,
but yes,
yes, absolutely, and that sort of, yes, the sort of informal chat and so on. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm wondering if we've got a mixture of English style and continental style knitters, because I was taught English style and I'm trying to learn continental because it's a bit quicker, and I I haven't done lace continental yet because I'm still just learning. I just wondered what everyone else's experiences are.
I personally, I knit lace throwing, you know, my British style, English style, but 2-color knitting I knit, you know, one in each hand.
Yeah, because you can have one yarn in each hand, can't you? One color, yeah.
Yeah, which is really speeds things up a lot. Yeah, that's an interesting point actually. I'm getting yeah. How are people knitting?
I'm a thrower because it's how I was taught, and I enjoy it, and I don't sort of worry about being fast. I just have pretty good tension, so I'm happy with that. And even if I do colour work, I just drop the yarn and pick it up as I need it. I don't worry about doing other things.
A few years ago, when in my branch group, we had a discussion about whether or not continental was quicker, and what whether or not if you'd been taught English style, you should try and change. And our Danish lady sort of said, "Don't bother." She said, work with what is easiest for you. I think there is sort of medical advice that actually it can be very helpful to chop and change between different styles, because you are using different parts of your hand and different but basically, unless you're knitting for a business, if you're like most of us, sort of crafters and hobbyists, or sort of amateurs, if you
addicts,
then the thing is to find a way of knitting that gives you the drape and the fabric and the style, and is ergonomically as good for your hands and your shoulders and the elbows and joints and all the rest of it as you can. I mean, I can do both. Be like Angharad. If I'm doing colour work, then I'll have one yarn in my left and one yarn in my right and do them. And we have one lady in our group in Reading who knits with the yarn around her neck, and she just flicks with her, she just Portuguese style. She's actually Sicilian, but she flicks, and I've got to go back and have another lesson with Josie at some point, because I can do the purling is very easy, but the knitting you have to do a little bit more with your right hand, to get the stitch in the right place, or I find that I do, to get the stitch in the right place. So I think it's horses for courses, really. It's a matter of finding what's comfortable for you, what takes the amount of time you're prepared to give to it, and what doesn't give you medical problems down the line.
I think this thing about varying is really important, because I did a vast amount of very fine tight knitting. We took the train from Yorkshire to London to Paris to Barcelona to Malaga and back again, and I was knitting more or less all the way, and I got I think it must have been a repetitive strain injury in one shoulder.
Yeah.
And I this is about 18 months ago, and I got really quite, I started trying to think through what I was going to do, whether I was going to teach myself to knit the other handed, completely left, because I'm right left-handed, or whether I was going to go to my, continental holding yarn or whatever. And fortunately, I'm now really careful to take breaks, and also and so I got exercises, and I got a steroid injection, and oh, it got x-rayed. And touch wood, it's fine, and I can knit more or less ad infinitum, but I think the thing of taking breaks, I mean, if you do knit a lot for whatever reason, because you like it, or you're a production knitter or whatever, and yes, I'm doing these sorts of things, and I've got an app called some people call it Pomodoros, and because it's Italian for tomato, and that's what it looks like on your screen. Tomato focus keeper, and you get 25 minutes. This is and then you get a 5-minute break, and you turn it on, and
little click down for you.
And it's a bit like Captain Cook's crocodile or whatever it was. But it's great. I find it. I try to remember to set it. If I've got a knitting deadline, and also when I'm using the computer as well, because you just have to get up and move around, and then you get the 5 minutes, and you do this sort of thing. But it is very, very worth doing.
I mean, I noticed that Jane says that when she tried Continental, it got into a mess, and therefore it wasn't any quicker. The reason that it might not be any quicker, of course, is that you're learning a new technique, and you've got to build up muscle memory, and all that stuff, and that doesn't come easily. I mean, I've tried to sort of do the sort of flicking type knitting rather than sort of what they call throwing, and I can do it for about sort of 3 or 4 stitches, and then it all goes to rack and ruin. And so that's because I haven't built up the muscle memory and the ability to do it. But I think the thing is to, as Howard said, is to be aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it, and to make sure that that you're not knitting or crocheting or needle pointing or other such things that can end up giving you problems.
Do it on a knit row, but not a purl row. And as long as it's just 2 colours, so Fair Isle would be fine, but more than. And then I just lose patience with myself, so go back to throwing.
And of course, one of the nice things about if you're doing sort of Fair Isle, if you do it in the round, of course, then you're always knitting. So you're already basically doing the same sort of. You're not having to chop and change.
So like Catherine said, my tensions are so different with the two.
And that's of course where it comes back to, sorry, Angharad, that's where it comes back to, if you're going to be doing something where it's not your normal way of knitting, you definitely have to do your swatching, in order to check that you can actually handle your needles, handle the yarn, and get the gauge, and get a drape in if you're doing a garment or whatever that actually matches. It's not quite so important when you're doing sort of shawls and scarves and cowls and things of that nature, but if you're doing something that's a shape and fitted, very, very important to know what your tension is going to be like. Sorry, Angharad.
And that the stitches don't look any different as well if you're. It occurs to me, and I haven't experimented with this, but talking about circular, that you could that lace would adapt itself to knitting circular very easily. I mean, one of the tussles with these charts is that they're flat, and I think we've become so used to knitting in the round is almost the default now, isn't it, for sort of contemporary patterns and so on. But I guess thinking, so you could possibly knit a cowl relatively simply circular. It would just be a tube, but anything else you'd have to then steek, and that could be a bit scary. No,
No,
it's going to catch on. Good bit of
No, no.
goss stitched down the edges.
knit yourself a swatch and take a pair of scissors to it.
Absolutely, yes, yes, yes. I'm a big fan of swatches. Yes.
and see how it works. Yeah, I mean, there are ways of stabilizing the stitches before you cut them, but basically, it doesn't unravel. I mean, I was scared the first time I tried to steek something, but it is easy to do.
As long as you use wool, not acrylic.
Yes, yes, I was
Yeah.
thinking,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes,
So
you
one
need
thing-
some.
Oh, sorry, I did mean to ask in the introduction is, where is everybody? I mean, I'm in London, Lindy's somewhere in
Berkshire. I'm near Ascot Racecourse, near Reading, so
oh, right.
Maggie's not far from me, I know.
Steve, are you in somewhere down by Bristol? Steve?
Yeah, it takes me a while to hit the mute button. My aim isn't very good. A little bit further, Honiton, which is just off junction 29 of the M5.
Oh, right.
So Bristol and then Kew for an hour and a half.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah.
There's always
and of course, Honiton's rather appropriate because it's known as the lace town.
the lace.
But the other sort of lace.
Right. Yeah. Zoe, where are you?
I'm in Derbyshire, in Belper.
Oh, right. Oh, nice. Up north. Margaret, I'm going down round my screen in order. Where are you?
Oh, I'm in Epsom, quite near.
Oh,
the
right.
school.
Oh, so you're not far from Lindy either. Jane, where are you geographically? Where are you?
Just south of Ely in Cambridgeshire.
Oh, right, nice. I've been through on the train, and looked at the cathedral and.
Oh, right, you can see the cathedral from the train, can't you? Yeah, yeah, very proud of our cathedral, it's beautiful.
Oh, yeah, it is very nice. Tricia, where are you?
I'm an hour from Melbourne in Australia, in Victoria.
Are you actually there at the moment?
In Australia, yeah.
No. Brilliant.
Yeah.
What time of day is it?
It's 10 to 9 in the evening.
Oh, nice.
That's
Oh,
dedication.
that's quite civilized, isn't it? Not quite as
That is quite civilized. Yeah, the last one I have tonight finishes at 1:15 in the morning for me.
right.
Dedication.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that is great. That is really, really excellent.
I've really enjoyed it. It's been fantastic.
Are you still down in lockdown in Victoria?
Melbourne is, but regional Victoria just came out of lockdown on Friday, so I can go back to work this week. But my sister's in Melbourne, and no, they're still in lockdown.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. It seems to be bad out there, and of course it's winter with you as well, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Or getting to the end of winter. Yeah.
Well, spring. Yeah, it's just coming into spring, but because we're right at the bottom of the mainland, we're very, very cold. It's like our winters are very cold. Yeah.
Oh, so
I
you'll
think
need.
it's 14 degrees today. It was beautiful. Actually, it was a lovely, lovely day. But actually, I went into the country for spinning at a farm an hour from us today, and it was just beautiful. But yeah, this is pretty normal for us.
Great. I'm glad I asked. So, Kit, where are you?
I'm in London as well. I'm in Walthamstow, right on the edge of Epping Forest.
Oh, nice. Yes, yeah. I'm in East London at my daughter's, and they get out to Epping Forest, and from time to time.
See the deer?
Oh, probably. Yeah.
Muntjac deer. No wild sheep, unfortunately. So no picking up.
No picking up wool gathering. Catherine, you were in London, I think. She's not. Oh, has she frozen? Oh no, Catherine.
I think she has. No.
Yeah. So Anne, where are you?
I'm in Banstead. just close to Epsom.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yes. My parents lived in Woking for a while, so I know down there, but it's years ago. So yeah. Oh, interesting. It is. Yes, it is a very kind of, I suppose, double-edged is the strengths and weaknesses of all this remote stuff. Maybe we will get to I was going to a language class, and it was so there'd be some of us in the room and then one or two on a screen sort of in the corner. Disembodied heads, it's a bit strange, but it sort of works. Anyway.
What language are you learning?
Oh, I was trying to have a go at Spanish, and I can order a beer, and that's so important stuff done,
Very useful.
But I've been, well, I still am really researching liturgical gloves, and there are quite a lot in both Spain, France and Italy really, and so some of the catalogues are in Spanish, but the other interesting thing is that especially for things like catalogues or descriptions, which are very, just a pair of gloves, silk, blue, from Barcelona, that sort of thing. Using Google Translate, you can use your smartphone on Google Translate. You've got a camera option, and you just shine it at the text. Google Translate can be really, really useful. And I've translated whole emails to people in fact, Portugal, with talking about Portuguese knitting. Rosa Pomar, whose book about Portuguese knitting was translated into English a couple of years ago. She put me on to some in Portuguese collections, and so it's been much more doable with Google Translate than it would have been without it, in terms of contacting people and finding things out. Oh, and one thing I was going to mention, quite often, and I've seen this in Estonia, quite often when a knit two together instruction's given, it's much easier to knit two together through the back of the loops. I mean, just the direction the needle goes in is a much more natural one. I know SSK has taken over from TBLs quite a lot, but I quite like TBLs still. And it's this idea that if you do something one way in a pattern fabric, then keep doing it that way. And you get a certain, the fabric has a sort of rhythm to it and a consistency. So have you been in other workshops, anybody, from the Unconvention?
Yes, I did the one with Rachel yesterday, casting on and casting off.
Oh, did you? Such a good one. Yes, yes.
And it was very interesting.
Yes, I bet. There's a book, isn't there, now, of I think something like 100 cast-ons and 100 cast-offs. I mean, just unbelievable.
It's as I say, when I got Monty Stanley's book, I mean, sort of, the first actual, sort of technique bit, which is about sort of chapter 2 or 3 in the book. She has all these different ways of casting on, sort of, casting on with one needle and casting on with your thumb and a needle and casting on with 2 needles and doing Channel Island cast on with, sort of 3 yarns, and it can be sort of mind-blowing when you look at them. I think the problem is that with things like cast on, we've all learnt one or possibly 2 ways, or we're taught 1 or 2 ways, and we tend to think that that's the only way to do it. And yet, if we experiment with some of these others, you actually get a better edge and a better it matches what you do. If you want a comparable cast off to a comparable cast on, it can be handy to actually expand your knowledge, and that's one of the fabulous things about convention, is when we have these workshops, it allows us to practice and to see different things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I sometimes see you see things like rib cast off using just knit stitches, and on otherwise nice garments, and you think, oh, what a shame they didn't know to do a cast off in a knit and purl. And yeah, and I mean, big tip for hiding clunky cast-ons or casts off for things like scarves is add a fringe. And also I'm a big fan of oh, and I see somebody's been to some of the talks as well. Oh, great.
Yes.
Excellent. I'll tell Barbara. It is I like adding a crochet edge to knitting. I think it's the one thing that Elizabeth Zinnemann and I don't agree on. She believes that crochet should not be mixed with knitting. I don't think she gives any reason for this. It's just what she thinks. So you've got to get on with it. But I think a bit of crochet is just, well, particularly for getting rid of curl. A bit of double crochet and a bit of crab stitch, double crochet work backwards is just perfect. So, and also for things like these scarves or shawls, a central graft like in the cockleshell one can just make sure that both your ends are symmetrical. And there's a book of Faroese shawls and scarves by, I forget her first name, Starman.
Alice Starman.
No, it's Starman. I think it's with an H. Some Faroese scarves and shawls. So she does, in each stitch pattern, she does, if I could type, I'd be much better off. She does a scarf, and then she does a Faroese shawl, which are this sort of triangular shape, so they sit over your shoulders. And she has you knitting those from both ends, and then you graft down the middle. So that's worth remembering, I think. Oh, what is her first name? She's American.
What's the book called, Angharad?
I think it's called Faroese Scarves and Shawls.
I think her name starts with M.
But I can't remember how to spell.
I'll go and have a quick look on Google. I think I may even have the book somewhere on my bookshelves, but I can't remember.
Yeah, it's a great book because it's just got so many different stitch patterns. They're all just basically, they're lace ones, eyelet ones like these are. Yarn over knit two together, or the other way around.
It's Myrna, Myrna.
Oh, right.
Myrna Starman, and it's Stahman. And yes, her shawls and Myrna.
Stahman. Yes, there is done.
I have got that book on. I'm sure I got them. I'm not sure where I got it. That's the book.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's the one. Yes. From the neck down. Yes. Thanks very much, Lindy. That's great.
I haven't yet knitted anything out of it. I was given some Kiviot a few years ago.
Oh.
And I was going to knit one of the shawls, well, one of the scarves with it. But that's a project that I haven't actually got round to yet. But
oh, well, maybe this workshop is is just the you know, the impetus you need. I think Kiviot is one of those yarns, or the sort you'll have if you've got it. It'll need washing to bloom.
Yes, it's yeah. As I say, it was bought as a present for me a few years ago. It's been in my stash for a little while, and I take it out every now and again and pat it and put it back. I think, yes, I really must knit that. I really must, give myself a timetable to knit that. But
well, speaking as someone who's had moth in the house, I would say get it knitted or get it in the deep freeze.
Yeah. No.
Don't pat it too much or you'll felt it.
Well, yes, yes, I knew. It's the problem with some of these really expensive and sort of high-end yarns that they look beautiful and they look gorgeous, and you sort of think, perhaps I'll just patch it and put it back.
So is it the same colour as the scarf from the collection?
It's a sort of hyacinthy blue. I think.
Really?
I think.
I didn't know they dyed it. Oh, how lovely!
I haven't looked at it for a little while, so I'm not quite sure. But it's sort of wrapped up and sort of protected with cedar and lavender and all sorts of other stuff around it, and in a sealed container, so that hopefully the moths won't. Hopefully the moths
I've only
won't.
seen it undyed, yes, like you.
Yes.
I don't know if I like my lace. It's come out quite big. I'll finish this row and I'll show you. I haven't done very much. You can. So I've done 4 rows of 2 different colours. I'll just finish this row. I did 43 stitches, which is not too many.
So which pattern did you start with, Catherine?
I just started with the razor shell because I thought they looked really nice, those scarves, but maybe this is just too, maybe 4 ply is too thick.
It shouldn't be.
Well, you
you can't see very much of it. There's not very much of it.
That's coming out nicely.
Yeah,
it's all right. That's the trouble with lace. It never looks very good, does it, at the beginning?
What fibre is the yarn?
Well, this one's wool. This is stock wool, and I think this is probably a bit thinner. This one is. This one, I don't know what this is. This is Madeleine Tosh unicorn tails or something. I don't know what it is.
How nice.
Yes, this is much nicer, but it's a bit thinner. Yes, this one is just a bog standard stock wool.
Oh, okay. Yes, yeah.
I think
you can.
So will you continue that in stripes?
Well, shall I try this colour next and see? I don't know. What do you think?
Depending on which colour you prefer, or which it might go with, or whatever, or however much you've got. I mean, all those things.
I haven't really got very much of any of these. I've just got these.
Oh, well, you maybe need, if you were going to aim to actually make it into a scarf, then you probably do need to do stripes, in equal, however many, 6 rows of each or something like that, which is going to give you quite a lot of ends to darn in. Because if you
I could just do all of one colour until I finish it, and then all of the next colour. That might be
a sort of colour blocking. Yeah, that's a great idea, actually.
A quick way of just checking whether you would actually like the effect, Catherine, is if you've got a wooden ruler, just wrap, sort of not tightly, but just wrap, say, 6 strands of your brown, 6 strands of your yellow, and then 6 strands of your grey, and see whether that color block looks like something you could cope with.
Yeah.
Because this sort of color wrapping is a good way of seeing, sort of whether or just around a bit of cardboard, or I use a little ruler. Or you could do it with sort of with 4 wraps or 6 wraps or 8 wraps to see whether or sort of do 2, 4, 6, 8 and see whether very quickly, before you knit your 43 stitching.
Yes, that's a good idea.
Stitches, it's a very quick way of checking whether colours will work for you, because it might be that the grey is a little bit too light, and it might not, and it might be better to have yellow, brown, grey, and brown, grey, yellow, or something, and that way, you're not using up any yarn, you're not using up much time, like I say, in knitting and having to unknit, which is always a bit of a pain. Any of those sort of techniques where where you can just quickly see, quickly check.
Good idea.
The other thing to do is, if you've done your wraps, if you take your phone and get it so it's working the camera's working in black and white, you can then see whether you've got enough contrast there. Because if there's not enough contrast, you won't actually be able to see any pattern that you're knitting with the colours.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the other thing is, I think everything that Lindy said and Steve is a great idea, and I'm all for it. Sort of trying to envisage something, and I'm quite. It's a balance, I think, between using colour and being able to see the structure, which is why light colours are so much better for anything with texture or structure. I have seen, obviously Gansey, dark navy blue or black Ganseys are the exception to that, and I have seen Arons knitted in dark green and dark navy, and they do look stunning, but it's a lot of work for not very much impact. And I know a lot of lace is knitted with these variegated yarns and everything, and I'm a little bit ambivalent about them personally, but I do think that looking at these very simple scarves, with these quite plain colours in a way.
I like that.
Yes, I think some of the self-striping yarns that are now designed to cut, if they were in socks, the stripes would be probably 5 centimeters or 1.5 inches or something like that, quite blocky. I think on a piece of knitting this wide, you'd get quite a good stripe effect with them, but you'd be taking a little bit of a risk, but hey, it might be worth doing.
but yes, it really, Catherine, comes back to sort of what you feel. If you look at the one that Angharad's got showing at the moment, there's quite a wide amount of cream, and then only really a small amount of the blues, and then the yellow, then the yellows. So the color. If you choose one of your 3 colors as your main, and
they're actually, yes, they're not all even, are they? They're not all exactly the same width.
It's reverse colour pattern as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got the grey, and then the yellow, and the
and then the blues, and then the big blocks of cream. You might find that, and that's where the wrapping technique
really nice.
Will work, because you can then see how much of each colour you want to put through.
Well, I might not really like these colours. It might just be it happened to be the sampler, because it's what I happen to have that was plain. I haven't got a lot. I'm in Norfolk. I'm not in my normal home.
Well, the other thing I was going to suggest as far, well, they're good plain smooth yarns, which is just what you need for trying this out. So maybe they will always be samplers. But the other thing, someone who volunteers at the Guild, if she's trying out a stitch, and doesn't have to be lace, it can be any kind, if you've got cotton, dishcloth cotton, or a coloured cotton, then if you cast on a square, or you cast on to be a square, then that makes then a washcloth, either a dishcloth or a washcloth, and that with a bar of soap makes a really, really nice present. And you've sampled your stitch pattern. So you know, there's more than one way of skinning the proverbial cat. I won't say that any longer.
Why not?
You can in this forum, Angharad.
But you know, what Lindy was saying about, you know, experimenting with your colours and how they go together, and you know, you could have if you were thinking about it as a garment, you could have a block of each colour at the end, each end, and then the grey behind, where it comes behind your neck, or you know, and you can knit with 3 colours. With 3 colours works if you knit 1 row in each. You can keep it going, and you've only got to the yarn, you can take the yarn up the side, because it's only going up 2 rows each time. And you can do that on a knitting machine as well. So you could very much intermix the colours with each other if you wanted to. So there's it is the tyranny of choice, really, that you end up with.
Lots of fun.
Yes, it is lots of fun. I ended up knitting in white 3-ply. But yes, I was away from home. That was all I had. It's either black or white.
Can I ask a question? You know this picture of the shawl? Is there any chance we could have a picture of the shawl that matches the patterns? Sorry, I'm sitting with my back to the sun, so I can see what I'm doing, but you can't.
Oh, don't worry.
So we know what it looks like. So, you know, where it says bead stitch or razor shell, can we have a sort of picture where it points and says this is the end product of razor shell on this lovely yellow shawl?
Yes. How is best to share these? Should I, Steve? I'm hoping you. Because I have. Let me show you. I have got them. That's bead stitch, but it's not a very good photo. I'm just wondering if I've got a better one. Can you see that?
Yes,
that's bead stitch, and it's labelled as bead stitch.
And that would be really helpful to see that, so that when I do it, I know that that's sort of what I'm aiming for, and I'm not aiming for, you know, what I might think it is, which could be Crest of the Wave or something.
Yes, I take your point completely. Yes, I can do that. I'll talk to Steve and we'll get them emailed out to you or whatever. What I did want to tell you about before we pack up, if there's no more burning questions, but please don't go if there are, is if you do want to look at lace knitting, Shetland lace particularly, the book that even the Shetlanders use, as far as I understand, is Sharon Miller.
Yes.
And she's not from Shetland, but I don't think that there's much that she doesn't know about Shetland knitting. And thank you, Lindy. Oh, that's Steve. Yes, it's on. She's got. I think there are 2 books. I think she's got one called Haps and Shawls, but I think that's the first one. So that I would recommend it very highly. It's rare. It's on Amazon, and it's not quite into 3 figures, but it would be worth getting on into Library Loan to have a look at or something. Or we have got it in the library up at Britannia Mill. So if you were able to come up, then you could have a look. The other very, very good resource, in my opinion, and you'd be interested, I think, to have a look at this, and some of you might know about it anyway. Shetland Museum ran a Shetland lace sort of research project about 3 or 4 years ago, and they blogged about it, and there's a lot on their website, and you will find it if, I'm sorry, I haven't got the URL to hand. I think it's and there are several posts. They had a PhD student who researched it, and a lot of lace patterns were published in Victorian knitting books as Shetland lace sort of got invented and developed, but they didn't put illustrations. In fact, it's quite funny because it kind of comes on from what we've just been asked, which is, can we have images? And so these Shetland lace patterns were written down. So what Carol Christiansen, the curator up in Shetland, did was to organise a project where people got given the written down instructions for a lace pattern, and they knitted the swatch so that then it could be seen what it was like. And I think they all got sent back to Shetland, and I know there was a talk about it as well. And that is all on the Shetland Museum website. Oh, somebody's found it. Thank you so much. So
can I just say there, Angharad, I did actually do some of the samples, and they did a lovely display of them up there in the museum. But one of the things they were saying was that some of these patterns were claimed to be Shetland lace, but weren't. So that was also part of the research that was being done.
Yeah, I think there's been one PhD done already by Rosalind as part of that project. But yeah, I mean, this whole thing about Shetland lace, when we were looking at the copyright on these patterns and whether it was okay to write them out again and so on, Mary Thomas gives 10 patterns as traditional Shetland lace. But you'll find them in other knitting cultures as well. And they possibly didn't come into Shetland until, I think it's something like 1834 or something, so they came from somewhere else. And so there's all kinds of whys and wherefores, about it. But because our yellow sampler is called Shetland lace, that's what I sort of limited it to. And the other, so yes, this is what we call Shetland lace. And the samples, with the exception of the Kiviot one, the samples are all Shetland lace as we understand it. They're from Shetland and knitted in Shetland. And the other place, I think, particularly for lace, is that there is now a little visitor centre apparently on Unst, which is the island that's most famous for its lace on Shetland.
But this goes right back, doesn't it, Angharad, to where you started. That sort of with this discussion about feather and fan and old shale. I mean, Liz Lovelock is absolutely adamant that they are two different stitches.
Oh right.
And that one that the name of one has been appropriated to the other by it being transferred to America and other sort of other places in the various diasporas and this sort of thing. So and some purists say you can only call it Shetland lace if you actually use Shetland wool, to create it, and this sort of thing. So
I know.
I think it's just beautiful whichever way you go.
I know. I mean, I think ideally, at some point, if you were able to come to the collection, or if there's another workshop where just Shetland shawls were got out. I mean, the the problem with that is that they are just so delicate, and packing them and unpacking them is really, really difficult, and you've got to be so careful. But we do have some lovely ones in the collection, and actually I hope that you feel as though you've seen plenty, because you know, I wish I could sort of, you know, pour the knitting down through the screen, you know, so that if I hold it up, you could feel it, and because it is just so lovely. Even the simple little striped scarves, that I just think they're lovely. And let me get the one example of the very fine.
Yeah, gorgeous. Thank you so much. I'm really sorry that I've got to leave, but I've had a lovely time, and I do feel like I've been somewhere else.
Yeah.
You've transported us.
Beautiful. Well, thank you all so much, and I hope there aren't any burning questions, and if there are, I'm sure you'll be able to find me somehow or other.
Well, if nobody has got any questions, I would just like to sum up by saying thank you very much indeed, Angharad. That's been a super couple of hours. You know, the items from the collection have been amazing to see again. You know, it's lovely to actually see a couple of pieces that I hadn't seen before, and I love the way that that you've given us the examples, and sort of given us information about how best to work with what we're doing. So I've had a great time, so thank you very much indeed, and hopefully everybody else has as well. So we look forward to doing more.
It's
been lovely.
Great.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you.
Sorting it, and thank you all for coming. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye then. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.